10 coats of paint stained in tobacco.
Well, how do you do? Victoria Taft, I'm your adult in the room, and anybody who looks at me goes, hold on. You are an adult. Oh, yeah, I'm very much an adult. And great to be here. Take advantage of my expertise and my antiquity, won't you? Lots of coming up on the program today. Let's go to the rundown, and here it is. It's not all of it, but it's enough. Iran SITREP, Trump takes over the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, the mullahs are not, they've decided that they're not done fighting yet, so they're picking a fight with guys who don't have as much firepower as they do. Not that they have that much, but they could crush them. That would be the other guys. Like the Houthis are going after Saudi Arabia, for crying out loud. We'll talk about all of that on our Iran SITREP with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, Edmund Fitton Brown. And by the way, I always want to call him Sir Edwin, and he's not. He's a British guy, but he's an actual pretty buttoned-down guy. And yesterday was a big anniversary, second anniversary of Donald Trump being shot by some freak in Butler, Pennsylvania. Still don't know as much as I'd like to know about the killer, would-be killer. He's dead now, so we can't ask him any questions. Also, Trump, I don't know if you heard this, but Trump has put together a dead man switch in the event that Iran successfully takes him off the board. And that was made especially clear considering the fact that all weekend long, and last weekend, in several days, the mullahs have been calling for Trump's, unaliving. And because he took their guy out, so that's what's going on there. We have some details of the dead man switch. So we'll tell you about that. Pretty amazing. Don't forget tonight, I will be featured on the Townhall Tuesday on the collab show that is done between KlymatixTV and Tommy TV, a.k.a. Tommy for Trump, 420. And that's going to be at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern tonight. So please join me. I guess it's just sort of a get-to-know-you session. I mean, generally speaking, they have people who are younger on, and that's fine, but they don't know as much as I do. probably in many cases. So they're having me on, and there you go. Now, Iran war, SITREP, we got that. Then all of a sudden, did you notice that Richard Nixon's back in style? Yes. And it all comes down to the fact that people are getting pretty savvy, pretty hip to Watergate and how amazingly it resembles the sort of what happened to Trump with Russiagate, and how the intelligence and deep staters tried to take Nixon successfully, took Nixon off the board, and how they tried, did they try ever, to get Trump off the board? Well, now everybody's going, wait a minute. Okay, we might have been wrong about Trump. Oh yeah. So that's coming up as well. Dr. Phil wrote a missive about Donald Trump's mental facilities, and Dr. Phil is apparently hearing a lot from the left about how Trump's just off his nut. And so Dr. Phil, like a real life doctor, he's gone, not so fast. Let's see, what else do we have today? Oh, so much that I want to tell you about. And we will, actually. One thing I wanted to show you, in fact, I wonder if I have this. I, of course, meant to have this at the ready, but do I have it? Maybe. Let's see. It's a missive from some folks, and it's about Richard Nixon. And I thought, well, heck, I'll just play it. I'll play it today. I don't know if I do actually have it. Let's go over here. I'm going to play it before Edmund Fitton Brown comes on the program to talk about the Iran SITREP. So let's see. I just want to make sure I get this thing on. Here we have just hold on that one for just a second. Let's go here instead. Okay. Pretty interesting. All right, guys. Of course, I'd have a glitch at the very beginning. Sorry, guys. This is not supposed to happen, but it did. Oh, well, screw that then. I'll just suffice it to say Nixon's back. Watergate is back. And we're going to do an autopsy on that whole thing coming up in the second half of the program, because I think people need to know why everything ends with the word gate. Yeah, because it comes from Watergate. And I know people of a certain age do not fully appreciate the fact that Richard Nixon was not necessarily a bad dude. And he had his moments, but don't all presidents. So there you are. Okay, we're waiting for Edmund. Oh, here we go. Let's do it. Oh, now we finally have it. I'm just killing time for just a moment. Worth your watch, however, before Edwin Fitton Brown comes on. And here we go. Finally, something just kind of glitched on it. Here we go.
You're saying they did it to Nixon. Are you now saying that Nixon did nothing wrong and was wrongly pursued?
Yeah, no, I think if you look at the history of Watergate, you see that it was a setup from start to finish. You know, 4 of the 5 Watergate burglars, listen, 4 of the 5 Watergate burglars were connected with the CIA, were connected with the FBI. You had the Judge Sirica, who had backdoor meetings violating the law out to get Nixon. And I think, and this will be an unpopular opinion at this table, maybe with this audience, but in time, I think we're going to see Nixon vindicated, and the history around Nixon will be changed.
That's Chris Rufo.
They did it to Nixon. Are you now?
That's Chris Rufo, and he's a researcher. I think he writes for several publications, and he's been doing some deep dives into Gavin Newsom, by the way. But he's come to the opinion that hey, Richard Nixon might have gotten a raw deal. So we're going to talk about that coming up later in this hour with a man who's written a book. In fact, he's written 2 books about Watergate. Hold on here. Here we go. Postgate. He calls it Postgate because the real scandal is about how the Washington Post knew the CIA was involved and never reported it except one time, and that was just a fluke. And then mysteries of Watergate, and that's worth your time. This is also a podcast if you want to just start getting a little into it just a bit. Anyway, so what happened? What happened in the Iran situation? Well, Donald Trump basically took over He said, came to his senses. Who knows what happened to get, Maverick to re-engage with the MiGs. And so Edmund Fitton Brown is a man I turn to when I want answers to questions like this. He is with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, the former ambassador to Yemen for Britain, former negotiator, a key negotiator for UN sanctions against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And I welcome him back to the Adult in the Room podcast. We are so grateful to have him every time he can spare some time and be with the kids on the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks. Great to be with you, Victoria.
Where do we find you today? Are you some far-flung place in the Middle East or somewhere else?
I'm actually in the mountains of North Carolina, believe it or not. Taking a little bit of a break from the Texas heat.
Wow. So you're in North Carolina. Well, welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast once again, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that you're here. Well, we have found out that big boom booms are going on in Iran, not to put too fine a point on it, and so operations have resumed. And on Monday, President Trump called you and I both agree, the ridiculous memorandum of understanding, the MOU, a test, and that the Islamics failed the test. What's really going on here, if you don't mind my asking?
Wow. Well, I mean, I think the same calculations that were in play even leading up to the 28th of February, they're still in play. The Islamic Republic is not willing to compromise. And up to now, the US has been reluctant to commit the kind of force that would be needed to get its own way. And so there's been a long standoff, and it wasn't, it was called a ceasefire. There was an MOU, but we agreed that it was not well drafted.
It was sucked.
It really sucked, and it just left. I mean, essentially, it set up another breakdown because the Iranians thought they'd got a fantastic deal, and then they started calling out all of the things that they said that the Americans were not doing that they should have been doing under the MOU, and of course the Iranians were really pushing their luck with attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and also in continuing to back Hezbollah in Lebanon, and to claim that the Israelis were violating the MOU just by fighting Hezbollah. So with all that going on, it was inevitable that the US patience would run out eventually. And I think this is what's happened. US patience has run out. The question, of course, is what now? Now, you've probably seen there's been some quite strange communication from the US side, which of course is nothing new. There was this odd sort of false start on the idea of the US charging a toll, which was never a good idea.
No kidding.
And now that's already been walked back. And now what's being talked about, apart from the fact that the US has resumed proper strikes on Iran, not at the same intensity that we had in March, but still it's resumed them. But I think the main strategy that's probably about to be fully reimposed is the naval blockade of the Iranian coast.
How does that work? I mean, here we are. Let's look at our map here, if you don't mind. In fact, I think what I'll do is I'll go to a different map. Let's see if I can. Well, I guess this will work. I mean, it's not ideal, but there we go. So where are they going to attack on the Iranian coast? What are we looking at?
If you can move it in, so what you're looking at right now is that's actually the sea rather than the Strait and the Gulf. So
right.
Yeah, that's right. Now you've got,
here,
the Gulf.
Here we go. Here's Iran over here.
Yeah. So the top end of the Gulf that you can see there that's where Kuwait is, and also the very tip of Iraq has an access onto the head of the Gulf, and then as you work your way southeast, you get to a point where, and there's literally a point. If you perhaps increase the size again, if you can, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly it. You just
right
had
here.
it a moment. That's it. Yeah, perfect. So that's the point. That point of land. It's a bit of the Arabian Peninsula that sticks up to the north and into what looks like almost a sort of a cup to receive it on the Iranian side. That is the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz is where that point points towards the Iranian coast, and you have the narrowest waterway that exists in that particular area. So that is on the southern end of the Strait of Hormuz. The point itself, that is Oman. So Oman has the southern shore of the strait, and Iran has the northern shore.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just get this other map I've got. This one's just not cooperating with my stuff here. This looks easier. Okay. There. How about this?
Easier. That's easier to see. Yeah, because it's not so cluttered with data. So
yeah.
The top of that point. The top of that
Right
point
here.
is the Musandam Peninsula, and it belongs to Oman.
Yeah.
And the whole northern shore that you can see there, that's all Iran. And then it is worth just mentioning that to the left and the right of the Musandam point is United Arab Emirates territory. So the UAE also has a dog in this fight.
So no, what now? So they are you saying, why are we looking at this? I want to know what you're thinking and what we need to know.
Okay, so here I think are the key points. The US can pick off large numbers of Iranian, military industries, missile sites, drone launch areas, and also some of their leaders, some of the top military people, and some of their top political people. It's already done a lot of that in March and early April, but it seems to have resumed that up to a point. That's one option that the US has. It didn't bring the Iranian regime to its knees, and it may be that you can't bring it to its knees just by continuing with that policy. Then the other thing the US was doing was, you see that northern coast? Well, that extends in both directions a long, long way. Iran has a very long coast. And the US was blockading that coast, and it was preventing Iran from, Iranian ships were unable to sail from the Iranian ports, and it had actually shut down all Iranian oil exports. Now, that was choking the Iranian economy. And for reasons that I do not understand, the US gave up on that policy before they'd given it time to work. So I think that is what's going to be reimposed. And the hope is that with Iran unable to export oil and therefore running out of money and unable to pay its troops or its civil servants, that might bring the Islamic Republic to its knees. But that is also an uncertain prospect. In the end, if they're prepared to tolerate enough pain and to say, well, we don't care if people don't have food, we don't care if people don't have salaries, but we will never surrender, well, then, that blockade may also fail to bring them to their knees. And then you have this additional point. Can you open the strait in such a way that it's not threatened by Iranian missile launches and drone activity on that northern shore? And that's when you get to this question about whether the US is willing to commit ground troops. Because some of the, and this is dangerous. Obviously, it's politically dangerous for the president, but it's also dangerous for the American troops, because that's when you start to take casualties.
I mean, and so we've done a lot. Here's some B-roll of what the CENTCOM has put out. And this is, I think, off the H.W. Bush. Oh, no, this is just general B-roll here, what they've done so far. Lots of big boom booms, etc. And then what we have here is another, an attack with a drone boat. 3 of them, as a matter of fact. And check this out as they go. I mean, game-changing technology being used in the theater. And that is what's, we see 1, 2, 3. Or unless it's one boat doing everything, but I don't think so. I think it's 3. The big boom booms here, and then it cuts out. So we have the technology we're willing to use. So, I mean, how much of a game changer is the drone technology? That's the Corsair from Saronic, and it's pretty nifty stuff. It's what helped our pilots to be rescued recently. So what do you think?
I mean,
Game
it's
changing?
wonderful. It's wonderful. The quality of US military technology and innovation and the speed also of it, and also of the Israelis, actually, because, the Israel and the US are really our partners in this. There's an awful lot of joint development that goes on,
Yeah.
and it's hugely impressive. And from the point of view of any adversary, it's pretty terrifying, And if the Iranians were normal, if they cared about their people, then they would probably say, this is pointless. We can't win this, so we might as well look for a real compromise, a real agreement with the United States. And of course, the Islamic Republic is not normal. It's a revolutionary regime. It's committed to exporting its revolution. And so they would almost rather suffer than compromise, because they're afraid that if they compromise, that will look weak in the eyes of their own people, and ultimately the Iranian people will rise up.
What's the, well, some of them have already started. I understand that, something about not being able to afford trucks or something like that, and they're using tear gas, etc. But they didn't send in the besieged because I think the besieged are a little busy, so they didn't kill them. So tell me what's going on. Do you know?
Yeah, I have a pretty good sense of it. Remember that we had the protests in January, and then 30 to 40,000 protesters were killed by the regime, and the regime has been carrying out executions ever since then as well. So I'm not exactly sure what the number is now. Some people offered numbers up towards 100,000. I don't believe that that's probably quite true, but let's look at 30 to 40,000. And that is already a huge problem, because a lot of natural leaders of the protest will have been killed. So the question is, what does it take to bring people back out onto the streets? Now, there was a missing piece during the war that actually went on from the 28th of February into April. And that was that the US said several times that it was going to encourage the Iranian people to take back the streets, and then to provide them effectively with air cover. The idea was that if the besieged tried to mobilize, then you would have the eye in the sky that would go after them, and that would inhibit the regime from being able to mobilize against the protesters, and it would embolden the protesters and enable them to take over, government buildings, to capture military equipment and police equipment. So that is a possibility. That could be where this is headed, if the US has indeed decided to do that.
Do you think there are enough of them willing to do that?
Well, as we said, a lot have been killed, and so they're a little bit afraid. The regime has become more desperate, and therefore it's not going to hesitate to use lethal force. Whereas in January it did hesitate. It was trying to reestablish control without too much bloodshed until mid-January, when it realized that it was facing an existential threat, and then that was when all hell broke loose. So there's an element of communication here that's needed. It's necessary for the Americans and indeed the Israelis, who've got the best intelligence assets on the ground in Iran, to be talking to them and saying, we're coming back, we're re-engaging, and this time we're determined to help you to overthrow the regime. But it's a big ask. You are asking people to risk their lives.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I'd heard that they were officially, the Trump administration wasn't ready to tell people to go back out and to overthrow their own government. But they did just, this is kind of interesting. They did just kill a bunch of people, some of whom, down to, I think there was a lieutenant in the group, and I thought, holy crap, how few people do the the Iranians have now that they are getting down to that granular a level of, pretty low level people. Do you have any insight into that?
Well, the first thing to say is that this isn't new. There was quite a lot of that kind of tactical level targeting that was happening in the main conflict from...
Uh-oh. I think we lost you just for a second. Hang in there, Edmund. You've got some buffering issues from North Carolina. Here, I'll figure it out. I don't know. Don't know quite what's going on. think he's got connectivity problems. I think that's almost certainly what's going on. So I'm going to write him a note. Stand by, everybody. Oh, where's my chat? There we go. Oh, there he is. I see you moving. You're back. Oh, maybe not. He's trying maybe again. Sorry about this, guys. Send it to there. Yeah. Huh. God, we had such a good connection, and now he's completely gone. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that happens. You know, happens. This time it wasn't my issue. Isn't that great? Listen, I'm going to tell him that. I'm going to just give him a heads up and say, oh, he's coming back. Okay, I think anyway. Oh, where did he come from? Sorry, guys. Interesting. Hey, Edmund, you're not there. Nope, you're not there. It's okay. I told him he's good if he doesn't want to come back on and listen. Okay. So we are back, and the interesting thing that has been going on is the fact that we've gotten all the updates on what's going on in Iran. I mean, obviously, there are probably more that we could know about. That's just obviously something that would happen. We've seen the drone boats in action again. We've seen the sub base, an IRGC, that's Islamic Republican Guard sub base, which is on, I'm trying to think which island, Kish Island, I think. And that got blown up with a drone boat. So we are using our assets. We're not using $1 billion assets to destroy a $1 million object. So that's a good thing. That was an ongoing issue, of course, and that's an ongoing issue a lot in our wars. Vietnam, it happened a lot where you'd use a $50,000 bomb to get rid of a shack. It doesn't make sense. When you could send some secret squirrel types to do something about it and maybe plant some explosives, that sort of thing. Anyway, so that was something that was done quite a bit. Anyway, they are now reorging the entire Navy right now. And that's one of the reasons why, as we've discussed before, the former Secretary of the Navy is now the former Secretary of the Navy, because he wasn't acting fast enough on this whole drone boat technology. We've discussed the drone boats. We've discussed all of that. But I want to let you know that those are the creation of a company called Saronic. They're called Corsairs. I think they're one of the smaller boats they have. The U.S. Navy has done quite a bit to get up to speed, scale up fast, start using these, not just buying them, not just ordering them, using them in theater. This is crazy. And the Navy, under Hung Kao, who's the acting Navy Secretary, he said after the hostilities resumed against Iran that they're, moving quickly to get these boats into theater. And of course, you saw that they are. He calls them the Golden Fleet, Hung Kao does. And I wanted to take a minute or three to remind you of who Hung Kao is. We found out his amazing life story when he ran for office in Virginia. He lost, shocking and sadly. And here is the man who is now the Navy Secretary. See if you can spot what he has in common with President Trump.
This is the scariest sound you will hear when you live in a communist country. This is the last sound my parents heard when their fathers were taken away in the middle of the night, and they never saw their loved ones again. That's the sound of losing your freedom, the sound of always living in fear. That's my family's real life story. We escaped from Vietnam just days before Saigon fell to the communists. We were given a new life in the most generous country on earth. America saved my life. I graduated from the United States Naval Academy. I earned a master's in physics and fellowships at MIT and Harvard before the left replaced merit with racial quotas. I spent my life trying to repay my debt to America, my country, our country, with 25 years of service in Navy Special Operations, combat in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia. But now our country has taken a dark turn. That's Joe Biden's Justice Department sending 24 armed agents to arrest a pro-life activist in front of his family. That's Joe Biden's IRS raiding a gun shop and seizing thousands of records from law-abiding gun owners. Our names, our addresses, our social security numbers. That's Joe Biden arresting his challenger in the next election, a former president of the United States. And now a different sound. That's the sound of someone breaking into your home or business. The sound of crime destroying our cities and communities. That's how it all starts. They let criminals back on our streets. Millions of illegal immigrants pour across our border each year, including military-aged men from all over the world. And enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in this country. And the Biden family? Well, that's how it works in a dictatorship. The rules don't apply to the rulers. We are losing our country. You know it, but you also know you can't say it. We're forced to say that wrong is right. We're forced to lie. We can't let that happen. I've been all over the world. Believe me when I tell you, if America fails, there's nowhere else to go. I'm Hung Cao, retired Navy captain running for United States Senate. I still believe America can be the land of opportunity. I have an obligation to fight back against those who want to control our lives and disrupt our families. We need real fighters, not politicians, not bureaucrats, not keyboard warriors acting tough in a custom-made suit. No, not here in America. We must refuse to be intimidated. We must be fearless. I'm Hung Cao. I'm running for Senate, and I approve this message because I'm not done fighting for us.
That guy's the Secretary of the Navy. He did not win in Virginia. Can you believe that? But I'm glad he didn't, because now that means he's our naval secretary. You know what? Edmund Fitton Brown is back. Did you ever see that commercial, Edmund?
I had not. No, I was just watching it with fascination. Yeah, a very different style from some previous secretaries.
Yeah, just a little bit. You know, he's a captain. I guess does that make him an admiral now? Don't they have to make him an admiral to be in charge of the Navy Department? I don't know.
I don't think there's a sort of military promotion that goes with it, but of course you're above the admirals.
Ah, well, that's true too. Well, listen, thank you. I'm so sorry we lost you there for a minute. And I just wanted to wrap up with you and find out from you what mess we're in. You talk about ground troops. Go ahead and talk a little bit more about that.
Well, so, if you really want to control the strait in such a way that the Iranians can't threaten it, then you have to do something about the ground that they're using, and that obviously on the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz, that could involve putting troops on the Iranian shore. There are also some key islands that you could look at in the Gulf, but again, if you're on an island, that's effectively deploying ground troops, and of course they're then in a location that is known to the Iranians. It makes them more vulnerable. So it's tricky. I mean, the blockade, in my view, is the lower risk scenario. In other words, you accept that the Strait of Hormuz will be dangerous for a period, but you impose the blockade in such a way as to force the Iranians to compromise.
Oh yeah, that's a great This is Kish Island. This is where they apparently blew up a IRGC subbase. Is that right?
Yes.
How come
that's
we
right.
didn't? Yeah. How important is that, really?
Well, so I mean, it is important, and there are several of these islands actually in the strait or just on the side of the strait. You then also got Kharg Island that people talk about. Now that's not in the Strait of Hormuz. That's way up the Gulf near to Kuwait. But that is where 90% of Iran's oil exports go through. And so one possibility is to occupy Kharg Island and simply to take the Iranian oil, not to allow them to even to have it in their ships. The problem again is that you're putting yourself in a fixed location within range of Iranian missiles and drones.
How many missiles do they still have? And do you think, two-part, do you think that the reason that we took a pause was, for one, the 250th big shebang on July 4th, and also that we were running out of munitions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think running out of munitions is correct. Not completely running out, but running lower than is comfortable. When you're a global power and you have to worry about what might happen in East Asia, you simply can't throw everything at Iran. So I think that was a factor. I think the 4th of July may have been a factor, but I think the World Cup may be a factor because there's an element here of the US showcasing itself in a major sporting event. And then I think the elections also, I think there is a concern about what the impact of this conflict is going to be on the midterms. So I think those are all in play. One of the things that we haven't mentioned, of course, is that there is a secondary theatre here. And I don't mean Iran, I don't actually mean Lebanon and Israel. I actually mean Yemen and Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
That has kicked off over the last few days with the Saudis trying to maintain their blockade on flights into and out of Sana'a. And the Houthis have now attacked Saudi Arabia again. So that ceasefire is more or less broken down as well. So we're standing on the edge of a sort of a generalized conflict here.
Yeah. You're a subject matter expert on the issue of Yemen and, of course, that entire area. And because of your being an ambassador to Yemen. And so, did I say Yemen before I meant Yemen? But so here's, I do wonder if we are looking on the precipice of a more generalized war. Who's going to take? Should that happen, Edmund? Who's in charge?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think there is an argument that says that it's time for the West to adopt a zero-tolerance policy towards terrorists. We have indulged the Houthis, negotiated with them, and they still talk about death to Israel, death to America. They still have ridiculous territorial claims on Saudi Arabia. They closed the Red Sea for no reason, and that was a direct challenge to the law of the sea. So we ought to face them down and say, no, we're not going to allow you to do this. And the same goes for Hezbollah in Lebanon. And the same goes for the Islamic Republic of Iran, which again is dedicated to the destruction of Israel and, teaches children death to America. So we need to raise the cost of adopting that kind of a terrorist approach to the outside world. But to do that, we need a consistent policy which will build an alliance where people trust the US not to change direction. That's the difficulty here, because if you're the Saudis, you worry that the US will rev you up to do something in Yemen, and then there'll be a change of government in the US and a change of policy, and all of a sudden you're out on a limb.
Yeah, nobody's gonna take a flyer on that. Thank you. I appreciate your expertise, and I was going to ask you about that, and got totally. We just had a blip, so that's what happened. Thank you, Edmund Fitton Brown, for being here. You are from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and you defend democracies all the time, and we appreciate your efforts. And thank you so much for some truth. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Yes. Oh, bless his heart. He came back and he got things working. All right. Yeah, I'm going to be on the, as I said, I'm going to be on the, let me just, live stream today, the KlymatixTV, Tommy for Trump 420, Tommy TV, but that's the official his handle. And for some reason you couldn't find me. Oh, God, great. I kind of wondered why the numbers were really low, and I thought, great show, very interesting. Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying very interesting. Also, can't wait till tonight. God bless you. Thank you so much, Emmy. I appreciate that very much. Okay, we've got lots of people there today. It's great to have you guys, but it's just kind of funny. There's a reason. Jordan is like a guy who's been listening to my shows for decades. Okay, so I mean, I've been on the radio a long time. In fact, I will be on the radio next week. I will be on KTTH in Seattle. Yes, I get to go visit there, and they still have me. It's awesome. So I'm going to be on there Monday and Wednesday, because Tuesdays I live stream, and that's just a homegirl can only do so much. Trump is a scumbag, and yeah, okay. Yeah, that reminds me. So many people have recently come out and said, I was fooled. What happened? How is it that I didn't realize that Donald Trump was getting lied on? And like me, it started me thinking about Richard Nixon again. I grew up during Watergate. I am the adult in the room after all. And, okay, thank you. Appreciate that from Klymatics. Thank you. Appreciate that. But it does make you wonder about, hey, growing up, seeing all that, of course, everybody just reflexively says, well, of course, Richard Nixon's a bad man. He obviously was removed from office. Well, he left office because he had respect for the office and he knew he couldn't lead. So Richard Nixon did that. And he went into infamy. And it was all a result of an operation that was started by the CIA that went a little wrong for Richard Nixon. They didn't bail him out. All kinds of things. Well, we're going to talk to the man who wrote the book on that, and we'll do that coming up in just a second. But I wanted to tell you about Donald Trump's dead man switch. And Donald Trump's dead man switch was reiterated again over the weekend, actually Friday, in the New York Post, because, of course, all last week, multiple days, we had people in Iran, of course, saying, hey, we're saying goodbye to the Ayatollah. He's going to go back to his 72 virgins, 72 raisins, whatever it is that he got when he entered the afterlife. And now everybody wants Donald Trump taken off the board. And of course, Donald Trump has almost been taken off the board more than twice. One of which was a big Iran death plot. The guy at the golf course, when he brought a gun to the golf course to take out Trump, that is believed to have been someone with some ties, some international ties. Just odd. Just very, very odd. So... and so the president has, said he's going to, if he dies, if this is the guy who 2 years ago was almost taken off the board. He says, if Iran takes me off the board, if they take me out, I've left instructions, he said. First of all, he says, I hope you miss me. But then he said he's left instructions. I've been on Iran's list for a long time, he told the Post. It's what we're dealing with. The only thing is I've left instructions. If anything happens, to just literally bomb them at levels they have never seen before, which we wish that he would do that before he actually leaves the planet. That would be much nicer. And it's kind of like, gee, you're really going to miss the guy when he's gone. But it's a dead man switch. He's taken off. Trump just goes boom. The big boom, boom start. And that is why he made this video White House made a video for the second anniversary, if you will, of his near death in Butler, Pennsylvania. And they did it on kind of the QT, which is an old-fashioned way of saying they did it and didn't say anything about it. Yeah. And this is what I mean when I say, you'll miss him when he's gone.
He was going to conquer him.
He takes chances that would make a less daring man shudder.
To think about the arc of where he's been, it's like some sort of mythical story or something.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me.
Donald Trump seems to always get stronger when challenged.
My God, that guy's got resilience.
Those who deal with you underestimate you and live to regret it.
It's always good to be underestimated. It is not about politics. It's about our love for this great...
Oh, he put in that scene at the dinner in New York where Barack Obama is mocking him. And that's when he said, oh, I'm in. I am so in. I didn't realize that the first time I saw it. That is amazing.
Country, America, and we're not going to let it fail. I will fight like no one has ever fought before.
Trump is the bodyguard of Western civilization.
You want to talk about a fighter, a walk through fire? He's an absolute savage.
He knows that this is much bigger than him. This is about the American people. They have no idea what they have unleashed. He was ready to go face the cameras and come out swinging.
What will future Americans say we did in our brief time here on Earth? It will be defined by your vision, your perseverance, and your grit. Nothing will sway us, nothing will slow us, and no one will ever stop us. We are Americans. Ambition is our heritage. Greatness is our birthright.
And the future belongs to us.
One of those beauty shot moments that a president sends out. Not all presidents do that, but a lot of them do. He's doing it, and that's, make you proud. You'll miss him when he's gone. I tell my kids that. They don't believe me. I just say, I was you. I was you. I didn't like Ronald Reagan. There's something wrong with Ronald Reagan. He's a sophist. He's a person, I don't like him very much. There's all sorts of stuff I don't like about him, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized in time that, he had good instincts. I actually liked the way, that made sense. Oh, and then all of a sudden the Soviet Union comes apart. You don't think that was an accident that it happened during his watch, do you? Or shortly thereafter. Come on. Oh, I love that. I'm getting a lot of people here are saying that Trump is a pedophile. All you have to do is prove it. Go ahead. I welcome any and all proof to some of the haters on the chat. It's okay. I'm glad you're here. I'm very glad you're here. So we're going to talk to John O'Connor coming up in just a moment. I'm looking for him to come on the feed. I think he's actually... Yeah, he's not even due for 4 more minutes. Okay, so Trump does a dead man switch. He says, I'm going to bomb Iran. I'm going to do that. And and I know that there are a lot of people. I just saw another video today by somebody, Chamath Palihapitiya, talking on CNBC, saying, when we saw that Trump said that, good people on both sides, and he supported racist people and stuff like that. And then we found out that when we actually went to look at the story ourselves, when you look at the video about what happened at Charlottesville, by the way, paid for by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Great job, guys. You guys really know how to pick them, don't you? Go back, if you have not seen the Southern Poverty Law Center show on the Adult in the Room, by all means, go back and look at it. And if you are not convinced, or if you don't even have some questions about what happened to the fact that, well, wait a minute, Russia, whatever happened with that, Russiagate, they call it Russiagate. What happened with that? Well, they tried to impeach him. They tried to impeach Donald Trump. There was no guilty verdict in the trial. They made stuff up, she put politely. There was nothing wrong with the call. He wasn't the impetus for January 6th. That was the second impeachment. And they then went after all of his attorneys to get them tossed off from the bar associations. Then they had to change the law and make stuff up and turn misdemeanors into felonies to go out and get him. Now, you think to yourself, now, Donald Trump is really all that bad. Why did they have to make so much blank up? Why did they have to do that? It's because he's not... Look, I'm sure the guy has really not great juju, okay? All of it, though? They had to make up all that stuff, and then they went after his attorneys for representing him? Oh, really? That's interesting. Why'd they have to do that? You know, one of his attorneys was just completely vindicated. Another, probably the top constitutional law professor, he lost his gig over it, of course, and attorney for Donald Trump, got kicked off the California bar. Why? Was he guilty of something? No, he was guilty of giving legal advice to the President of the United States. That's the extent to which they will go and try to get Donald Trump. And you say to yourself, man, I don't know. I don't think I would have been able to put up with it. Donald, we just saw that video he put out, right? Saw the video. Donald Trump is the greatest president ever, and whatever. They're trying to sell the idea that you know why he did that? Because he knows ain't nobody gonna do it. He's doing it himself. He is buttressing his own case, making his own case, because he knows the media is not going to do that. Nor would anybody expect him to, but they did it for Barack Obama. They did it for Joe Biden. Barack Obama used to be pictured with halos around his head. Think about that. Halos. That's absurd. So, Richard Nixon has horns, 5 o'clock shadow. He looks really bad. And you think, I wonder if Richard Nixon had fought hard for his job the way that Donald Trump has, what would have happened? Hey, wait a minute. They went after Trump with all this made up stuff. What happened in Watergate? That's where I went. And now other people are too. I just recently just showed you that one soundbite from Christopher Rufo talking about, and he's not the only one, multiple people are coming to the understanding, the realization that, hey, wait a minute. What happened? Why all of a sudden are people now wondering, oh, wait, hold on. What happened to Donald Trump? What happened to Richard Nixon? You suppose there might be something there? What do you suppose that is?
You're saying they did it to Nixon. Are you now saying that Nixon did nothing wrong and was wrongly pursued?
Yeah, no, I think if you look at the history of Watergate, you see that it was a setup from start to finish. 4 of the 5 Watergate burglars, listen.
Oh, they know better.
Watergate burglars were connected with the CIA, were connected with the FBI. You had the Judge Sirica, who had backdoor meetings violating the law out to get Nixon. And I think, and this will be an unpopular opinion at this table, maybe with this audience, but in time, I think we're going to see Nixon vindicated and the history around Nixon will be changed.
Oh, I think so too. And to prove it, I'm bringing on a man who's written 2 books about Watergate, and one of which was a complete rundown on the coverage of Watergate by the Washington Post, Woodward and Bernstein, the gold standard, the guys who changed journalism forever for the worst. His name's John O'Connor. Postgate, how the Washington Post betrayed Deep Throat, covered up Watergate, and began today's partisan advocacy journalism. He's written another one as well, and this is kind of a fun thing. He also had a podcast, which I encourage you to listen to. But buy this book because it's chock-a-block full of stuff. The Mysteries of Watergate, What Really Happened. John O'Connor is not just some guy who decided, I think I'm going to look it over and I'm going to write a book. He's a former federal prosecutor in private practice now, and he do you know who Deep Throat is? Besides a X-rated movie character or name, Deep Throat was the FBI mole that fed Bob Woodward information on where to go and what to look at next and these kinds of things. But they didn't tell the entire story, did they? And that's why I've asked John O'Connor to come back on the Adult in the Room podcast, because he knows the truth. And you wrote a piece recently, actually, John. Let's see. Let me find that. I want to make sure I get it up. Yeah, here it is. Nope, that's not it. I'll find it. Here it is. The newspaper that saved democracy spent 50 years hiding the CIA's role in that. And that is something worth reading. I just saw it shortly before I came on today. Here's this piece in the Washington Examiner, an excellent publication. And John O'Connor, thanks for coming back on. Appreciate it.
Excited to be here with you, Victoria, because you're right on the money in what you're saying. And, how do you undo 50 years of lies? It's very tough, but you and I are here doing it.
You wrote the book, and one of the things you say, you make the case that, the CIA had an operation. They were using the White House as the imprimatur in order to get the idea of a foreign nexus so that they could do domestic spying, which they'd been doing. Here's what I want to start with you. In your, I was just re-listening to your podcast the other day. And what I found interesting was that, let me just got to mute something. You talked about how you had done cases against the FBI or DOJ, what have you, and that you, here, I got to take this off. Sorry, I have a little glitch going here. But you looked at some paperwork, some case filings, et cetera, on what the CIA was doing that gave you insight into how to look at what happened to Richard Nixon and Watergate. Tell me what that was.
Well, it's a whole host of things, Victoria. And let me go back a little bit of background. I hope that this helps your viewers. I was an assistant U.S. attorney, the youngest guy in the office in 1974 when Woodward and Bernstein come out with All the President's Men and introduced this mysterious figure known as Deep Throat. Now, the rest of the world has tried to figure out who he was the next 32 years, including our estimable journalists. And I thought that because I was a circumstantial evidence buff as a prosecutor, if you're a white-collar prosecutor, everything's proven by circumstantial evidence. So I was a bachelor, had plenty of time, and would go to a coffee shop on Saturday, would go to my favorite bar at 6 o'clock and pull out the book and try to figure this out. So by 1974, about 6 months after the book, I figured out this was Mark Felt. I could prove it. And after the movie came up in 76, Woodward added one thing, and I knew by beyond a reasonable doubt I could prove this to a jury in a criminal case, but to a unanimous. So I knew that this was Mark Felt was Deep Throat. But in knowing that, you also know the other things and the reasons he was doing what he did. It had always been assumed that Deep Throat was this, he was such a principled guy, and he understood how terrible Nixon was, and so he was blabbing to Woodward, and that's the way Woodward made it seem as one of the authors of for the Post of all this stuff in Watergate, and got rid of Nixon based upon what supposedly Mark Felt told him. I know that's not true. I knew what happened. I knew what Felt's motives were in being Deep Throat. All Felt wanted to do, this is by way of background, all Felt wanted to do when he went into the garage the first time with Woodward is to try to get the Department of Justice to expand its grand jury beyond just the burglary to what was known as the Dirty Tricks campaign, which was minor pranks pulled by a young associate of Nixon's, which is what every campaign had done. John F. Kennedy did it. Nixon was doing it, but it was small beer stuff, not criminal, really. You could maybe call some of the things were misdemeanors if you tear a campaign sign down or something like that.
Right.
It's small beer.
Did he steal Donald Segretti? He was the guy you're talking about. Didn't he steal people's shoes and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah, here's what the funniest things he did is when a team, including Republicans against Nixon in the primaries, he would go around and people used to leave their shoes outside their hotel room. And then somebody would pick them up and shine them. It was a great service of hotels back in the day. You don't see it now, but they did. It's very common. So Segretti went around. He would pick up everybody's shoes, put them in a bag, and dump them down the trash chute. And at the next day, when everybody's ready to go out on their campaigns, they didn't have any shoes. Yeah. And so all these people would be out in the hallway saying, "Where are my shoes?" I mean, it's really pretty funny. Eventually, they'd find the shoes. Or another time, a campaign time, a sign might be crossed out a time of 2 o'clock and have the time as 3 o'clock. And so people would not show up at 2 o'clock. But Felt wanted to have a grand jury deal to see if those dirty tricks were related to the burglary. And because the dirty tricks was run out of the White House and everybody knew about it in the White House, not the specifics, but generally they funded it out of that somehow maybe the burglary was a bigger dirty trick. Well, that was a hypothesis that he wanted to prove. He didn't know if it was true or not, but there was a lot of ways to put the circumstantial evidence together, as you might in a murder say, well, maybe it's the husband, and here's why, maybe it's the boyfriend, but you don't know. So all this was an hypothesis. But when it was published by the Post, then all night long, Felt is in the garage meeting, and this is featured in the book and the movie. He's there for 8 hours until 6 in the morning. They finally get up off the concrete and so forth. And he's trying to give Woodward the picture of how the circumstantial evidence might fit together to connect the burglary to Donald Segretti's operation. Okay, fair enough. And if the article should have said, the FBI is looking into this to see if this is true. Now, it turned out it wasn't true. Okay, but the wording, and I have it in my article today in the Examiner, the lead sentence in it is, and also the reporters were not supposed to bring up the FBI in any of the reports because he's a deep background source. The beginning of the article that blew open Watergate, this is, everybody acknowledges the October 10, 1972 article is the article that blew open Watergate and got everybody hot and bothered, and it became very exciting for everybody. But what happened is that rather than saying the FBI wants to widen the investigation, it said the FBI has established that the burglary was part of a wide-ranging scheme of spying and sabotage directed out of the Oval Office at political opponents.
What?
Well, that's what the first sentence said. Now, number one, one of the things Felt knew was that this probably was not a campaign operation. What Mark Felt, that's Deep Throat, was the number 2 guy in the FBI. When he first saw this, he said to himself, this doesn't look like a campaign operation. It made no sense as a campaign operation. The DNC, which was burglarized, had no information. There was nothing to see. And it made no sense to anybody. It didn't even make sense to one of the operatives who put this together, but it did. It was important for the reasons I will tell you. What they were doing was not as everybody, and the Post led us to believe. The Post led us to believe that one of the targets here was Lawrence O'Brien, or Larry O'Brien, whose name is on the NBA championship trophy, but at the time he was the head of the DNC, that they were wiretapping him, or they wanted to wiretap him. Well, guess what? Number one, they weren't trying to wiretap him. They were wiretapping a phone far away from his office, and I'll tell you about that phone. And Larry O'Brien wasn't even in town for months, so it made no sense. What were they doing? Here's what the Post knew from the first day, and the White House didn't know it. White House didn't know it, that the CIA, who was behind this and had infiltrated the White House and had convinced a young person named John Dean and another guy named Jeb Magruder that this was a good idea. They were listening to a phone where if you're an out-of-town visitor, and the DNC had this special place where if you're an out-of-town visitor, a committee man from Montana, a governor from Wyoming, you came into the DNC and you could hang out, have a phone, somebody get you coffee, they'd give you movie tickets and all that stuff. They had a place to hang their hat, and it was a way for people to kind of chum together. And it had nothing to do with the campaign. Well, when an out-of-town visitor would come in and say to this one nice lady who took care of him, I'm kind of looking for a good time tonight, maybe with a female. She says, well, I got the thing for you. Go into this office. I want you to call this number, let it ring twice, hang up. You will get a call back within 10 minutes, and I will come in and show you the picture of the girl you're talking to, because I'm not sure who's going to call you back. She had these pictures, circumstantial evidence dictates, in her desk. Okay, it's important. It was in her desk with perhaps names of the girls and names of the clients. Okay, so, and then they would have a conversation. And the conversation would be dinner with sex to follow. They did not discuss money. So technically it was not prostitution. The money would be discussed later. But it was essentially, but as the monitor said, anybody listening to this would say it's prostitution. You just don't have complete proof because of the no money exchange. But we all know what was happening. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they were listening to. Now, I lived in San Francisco at the time at 970 Chestnut on Russian Hill, down that hill and up to the next hill and Telegraph Hill at 225 Chestnut. The CIA from the 1950s had been taping prostitutes in John's there, and they had a two-way mirror.
Yep.
Looking at them, they'd record them. Sometimes they'd give people drugs. This kind of stuff happened around the United States. And the thought was you could do two things. Number one, find out how to drug a guy so that he would talk. And number two, you would get extortionate material on somebody that was a big fish that later on you'd want to say, hey, do you want us to tell your wife or do you want us to do this? Do you want us to tell your government or are you going to help us out? So it was, but here's the rub. Everything the CIA had been doing for 20 years as of 1972 was illegal. It was against their charter. And if it was ever found out, all these people could, underline could, if it wasn't handled discreetly, could lose their jobs and their pensions. Their whole lives would go up in flames. And this was a highly kept operation from the very top of the CIA. And everybody reported, unlike other bureaucracies, this line went straight up to the head of the CIA, Richard Helms. The CIA had infiltrated the White House through a guy named Howard Hunt, who was a defendant and caught. And the Nixon campaign had been infiltrated by a guy named James McCord. And McCord was the burglary leader. Hunt was one of the guys that was the overall supervisor, kind of strategist of this. But they were at the CIA. One of the burglars was an active CIA agent named Eugenio Martinez. And another one, of course, was McCord. That's 2 out of 5. The other 3 guys were Cubans who had helped the CIA in the Bay of Pigs, and they were kind of known as CIA assets. If you wanted something done, you could hire one of these guys. They were kind of soldiers of fortune, Cuban patriots who wanted to get rid of Castro, and they would always help out the government if the government would then help them get rid of Castro. Now here we are 50 some years later. What's happened? Cuba's still in charge. But anyway, that's what this was about. So if they could get evidence that the President of the United States had approved some sort of operation like this, then they would have a get out of jail card free. They could say presidential national security powers trump everything. It may be against our charter to do this, but if the president says to go shoot Victoria Taft. You can go shoot Victoria Taft if it's deemed a national security thing. You can go shoot Hitler if we're not at war. That's the national security power that everybody, President Lincoln did, Roosevelt did it, so forth and so on. This is what you can do. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves on the basis of national security, even though it was otherwise against the Constitution. He said, aha, I'm a smart lawyer. I can free the slaves on national security because they're stupid enough to bring a war against us, and so I can withhold the help of the slaves. Now, what Lincoln also did was he did not free the slaves in the 4 non-belligerent states, Kentucky, Missouri, Delaware, and Maryland. Why? Because he had no national security ability to do it. My point is, national security trumps everything. This was going to be their get out of jail card free. Yes, they were listening to people, but they didn't care about that. They're already taping the same prostitutes on site. They had cooperation with the madam at the bordello. But what they were doing here was creating evidence that that's what we're doing, and the White House liked it, and they would give little half-baked reports to the White House, not the White House, but the campaign, to make it look like they were doing something. But that's the genesis of this. Now, the arrests happen, and what happens on the very first night, the Post reporter who was in with the cops, he was known as half cop, half reporter, interesting guy. He was in there. He was the only reporter that the FBI and the police let in there. And he found out that the burglar, Martinez, who was a CIA agent, tried to get rid of something during the burglary. When he did, he got wrestled to the ground. The cop almost broke his arm, he said, and he was trying to get rid of a key. It turns out, after trial and error, they found out that the key was to the desk key of the woman who had nothing to do with the campaign, but she had to do with entertaining the out-of-town visitors. Now, did the Post let us know about that key? No. To this day, I have a picture of the key on the copy of my book, written in 2022, 50 years later. I have a copy of the key pasted on the cover, a picture. You'll see the key right there. That's the key that the Washington Post hasn't told us about. Now it's what, 54 years. By the time I wrote the book, it had been 50 years. And as the arresting policeman said, that key that the guy's trying to get rid of is the key to the motive of the burglaries. And that's why he's trying to get rid of it, because it's the key evidence as to what they were doing. And no one to this day has really published that that's what this was about, was getting into that desk. And there's other evidence that they were looking for, at least the campaign people who were behind this, that had been talked into this by the CIA, the lower level guys. They were thinking they might find out what dirt the Democrats had on the Republicans. But this had nothing to do with the campaign, is what I'm saying. This might have been for John Dean's own personal book of business to say he's a cool guy, he knows dirt on the Democrats, but it had nothing to do with the campaign. And it made no sense. And trying to find out if Joe Blow from Montana is talking to Sally Doe about sweet nothings that night isn't a campaign operation. So it wasn't a campaign operation, and it was not primarily a White House gig. These lower level guys had been sweet talked into this by Hunt and McCord, not realizing that this was a CIA operation they were going for. But here's my point, Victoria. The White House, the Post knew the truth. They knew this was not anything to do with the campaign, and yet, based on that first garage meeting that I told you about, they said, oh, the FBI's established this is a campaign operation of spying and sabotage run out of the White House. So now, of course, later on, when Nixon is just, all these guys are confused in the Oval Office. They don't know what happened here. So they magnify a very small beer thing that Nixon is caught on tape doing and saying, aha, he really was trying to cover up this burglary. He knew that he did it. Well, everybody today, you heard that clip you played. I don't know if that's Christopher Rufo, but
yeah, it's
that
Christopher
clip of people going, oh, we know what happened. Yeah, you know what happened according to the Post. You've been lied to. Now you have the whole country saying, oh, you can't tell me Nixon wasn't liable and Watergate wasn't a big part of Watergate. Those guys never knew what was happening. They started waking up to what was sort of getting the drift a little bit around March to May of 1973, many months later. But guess what was happening then? Then Nixon foolishly had fired his attorney general.
Oh.
A new one came on, Elliot Richardson, who, by the way, brought in my partners, my father's partners, William Ruckelshaus, as his deputy. And they knew they would only get confirmed. They were talking to my father about this at the time.
Wow.
They were only going to get confirmed, Victoria, if they would agree to appoint a special prosecutor. They did. They appointed a Democrat that was connected to the Kennedy family, Archibald Cox, a fine guy. But once they did that, if you're a special prosecutor, you are not there to find out that the CIA was really a way of getting your targets free out of jail. And that's what they did. So they did not pursue the CIA thing at all. As a matter of fact, they hid what they knew. But my point is, up to then, it was starting to unravel. The CIA was starting to unravel. Now, let me give your viewers, if I can, another thing when they're reading the book or looking at the movie, and it's a fantastic movie and it's a fantastic book. It's just a lot of it isn't true. But if you look at the movie, a wonderfully dramatic part of it is Deep Throat comes into the garage in May of '73. Yes, I explained it in Postgate. Comes into the garage in May of '73. The normally cool, unflappable number 2 guy in the FBI is distraught. He's nervous. He's pacing. And he says, everyone's life is in danger. Watch out. For that, you also may be electronically surveilled, so don't go yapping on the phone. He then hurries out. He says, I have to go, but watch out. So they meet with Ben Bradley that night. He goes to Bernstein's apartment. They meet with Ben Bradley. He won't talk to Bernstein unless he has the record player on high, whispering to him, writing things. Go to Ben Bradley's home. They go out to the yard so they won't be wiretapped. A very dramatic part of the book and movie. But what was it about? At the time, the Post wrote nothing about this. And even in the book and the movie, you're not sure who it is that's threatening the life or who it is that's threatening to electronically surveil. Everybody watching the movie thinks it's the White House that's doing this to protect things. No, the White House is threatening to kill people, or the CIA is threatening to kill people because it's starting to get out that maybe it was the CIA. And if that happened, if you're going to spill the beans, we're going to kill you. Now, is this a bunch of hooey? I'm in the book. I talked about in the book. One of the guys that was surrounding the burglars that night, a henchman from McCord named Lou Russell, who was inside Watergate waiting outside the burglary site because he was going to curate the take so that the White House didn't see some of the stuff they didn't want to see. He was a drunk, and he later on started, in spite of being protected by the CIA, in his drunken moments would talk about writing a book. Well, right around the time of Felt being in the garage with Woodward on that last thing, guess what? Lou Russell's his heart medicine had been exchanged for poison, and he got poisoned. And his heart was irreparably damaged, and he died shortly thereafter. Another fellow that was also going to talk about the CIA and was going to do a press conference with George Bush, who at the time was the Republican National Chairman Committee, the Chair Committee. Another guy was going to appear with him and to blow open all the wiretapping the CIA had been doing. And isn't this amazing? He had a sudden heart attack too, before the press conference, which Bush then called off. Now, wait a second. And this guy was a friend of Lou Russell's, and he knew what had happened. He figured that Russell had been off by the CIA. So I get into all this in the book, but the main thing is, the simple truth for the audience is, the Post knew this was not a campaign operation. They knew it was about prostitutes and taping. They knew it was about the CIA. That story, had it come out, Nixon would have been more a victim than he was a perpetrator. He was a victim of this. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't knowingly put CIA guys in place. The CIA is pretty good at this. You know, they know how to do this, and so forth. Even Alexander Butterfield, the guy who told Congress that there had been a taping machine, it's all the evidence points to the fact that he was an intelligence guy that had been planted there. You know, this guy that's ready to be made a general. He's as handsome as a movie star, and he gives up his military career, and he's going to work in this administrative post in the White House that just happened to have access to all the taping in the White House, because they were taping Nixon. They're spying on Nixon.
They're spying on Nixon.
So when you talk about Alexander Butterfield, who just died recently at 99, he didn't give up his generalship to get a job shuffling paper in the White House. They had Nixon nailed in terms of spying on him and spying it on all these things because Nixon was so secretive, along with Henry Kissinger. But my point is, Victoria, they knew this. It's very simple. Of all people that knew everything, and I go into the book, it's not just speculation. I've got so much stuff in there that points to this, and also points not only what was true, but what the Post knew about this, and that the Post had it. They had it in their hands. They knew it. And I talk about what they had and what they didn't have. Not only did I uncover, you know, I'm not trying to strain my arm by patting myself on the back, but I know about this stuff.
I mean, you're the only one who's done this sort of reverse engineering of what the Washington Post knew and when it knew it. So you take the floor.
I did. So up in my garage, it took me. I had to go through 3 interns to get all these Washington Post things copied, because they're very hard to copy, very inaccessible, by the way, and I think deliberately so. And I went through a lot of summer interns, a lot of money but I wanted to make sure I had paper copies lest they destroyed them on the internet. I have a paper copy, besides an electronic copy, of every article they published. There are 3,000 of them. And then I've also got evidence as to what they had and what was in the public domain, so forth and so on, what was before Congress. So I'm giving you just the highlights that really get to the essence of this. But I prove the Washington Post many, many times over, concealing material facts as to what happened in Watergate that affected our democracy. So as a prosecutor, you know that concealing material facts is fraud. Now, the newspapers, it's something different. The newspapers can do whatever they want. I'm a free speech guy. You can publish this stuff in the paper, and it's not technically fraud, because you're not extracting money other than the price of the paper, but you're not making somebody get an investment for $1 million based on your article. But if you were a securities dealer and you were this fraudulent when you got money for shares, you would be in jail. If you're a real estate guy and you withheld material information, you'd be in jail. But there's no doubt about it. You're a paper. You've got not immunity, but you don't have a fraud case because you're just publishing stuff. But nonetheless, they talk about saving democracy. On the Post masthead, it says, democracy dies in darkness. Well, if it dies in darkness, they've killed it. Because and they really did, because they kept the world in darkness of what they knew. They knew more than anyone else, other than perhaps the CIA, of course. But anyone outside the CIA, they knew more than anybody, starting on that first day. And I go into it. They had access to witnesses, like, for instance, the Monitor, that was overhearing things on behalf of McCord. The Republicans were so stupid they wouldn't represent him. He goes over the Democratic side. So the Democrats know what he's listening to. And one Democratic lawyer, DNC lawyer, who was later hired to suppress some evidence that would have blown this open, he listened to the tape of the interview that the Post did of the Monitor. And he was so disturbed, he won his motion. He got Judge Sirica to suppress the evidence they wanted suppressed. But then he came back to the judge and he said, Judge, I'm a little worried. I want you to investigate, or I think the government was involved in this process. And by government, he meant the CIA. He was concerned because after he listened to the tapes, it was clearly a CIA operation. Now, he didn't know this. He's an outside lawyer. The Democrats have to come in to suppress some evidence. But he was an honest guy, and named Charles Morgan Jr. So Charles Morgan Jr. said basically, hey, I've listened to these tapes, the tape just of the interview of the Monitor. It's clear this is a CIA operation. Well, that never went anywhere. Howard Hunt, I'll give you something else for your viewers here, Victoria. I hope you find this interesting because
I'm fascinated.
I love it. I love it. But now Howard Hunt, who was the leader of the burglary team, or the overall supervisor, who had infiltrated the White House, supposedly was doing dirty tricks for Nixon, he's going to go to trial as one of the burglars. But unlike McCord, who would live and die for the CIA and would take a bullet for him, Hunt was a little different. He was a well-read guy from an Ivy League school. He had published several books himself. He wrote mysteries. And he had a wife that he was deeply in love with and these wonderful kids. They had this wonderful life out in suburban Maryland. And he didn't want to go to jail for a few years. He couldn't take it. So he decided that he would defend himself in the burglary. And what was his defense? The CIA
defense.
You can't make this up, can you? He was going to trial and had proposed that the actions were not legal because I believed and still believe that I was acting as a CIA agent on an authorized mission, approved, by the way, by, I think, higher-ups in the White House. I don't know, but I think I was approved by John Dean, and I think it was approved by John Mitchell, the former Attorney General. It wasn't by Mitchell, but that meant
right.
It was approved by Dean, who at the time was White House counsel. Therefore, it's approved by the White House. I felt this was a legit CIA operation. So Nixon's Justice Department, rather than saying, hey, Nixon, this is really good news.
You're right.
He's going to show that this is a CIA operation. They're very ethical. They don't go ratting out to the White House. They're prosecutors, and their job is to prosecute Hunt. So they were trying as best they could to try to say it wasn't a legitimate CIA operation. You may have thought it was, but it wasn't. And they're very worried about it. But Hunt persisted, and then they had a good witness in Chicago that could say that McCord told him that some bugs he ordered were for a CIA operation. So they had him. Hunt's wife was Dorothy Hunt was a CIA agent herself, who had just lost her job after the burglary as an undercover person at the Spanish embassy. She now puts $10,000 in cash in her purse, which was a lot of money in 1972. And put it in a purse, got on a flight to Chicago Midway, and this is odd, she bought death insurance in case she died on the flight. Who does that? But she did. So she gets on the flight, and sure enough, as they're landing in Midway, something happens, and the plane goes cattywampus, and half the plane dies. They crash, and she dies with her $10,000, and so forth. That sort of
kind of stuff. That happened a lot.
That happened a lot, and Hunt, was one of his reasons for going to trial was his wife, and now his wife is killed. He still persisted in the CIA defense and actually tried to get McCord to go along with this. This all came about and was even put forth in the Watergate hearings, with all the senators acting like this is just a big ruse to try to come up with a false CIA story. Hunt never testified, but McCord did. Well, Hunt didn't testify to this. But anyway, this was clearly Hunt's belief that this was a CIA operation. So finally, Dean convinced him, with his wife dead and everything else, to plead guilty. So he pled guilty. However, Dean was so dumb, he didn't realize that meant that Hunt just got rid of his Fifth Amendment rights to stay silent. And any time they brought him to the grand jury after he got his sentence, he'd be able to yap. So that's why Dean one of the reasons Dean decided he might be state's evidence. Hey, I'm getting out of here before the posse gets me, so that he takes off. So this whole thing, then of course Dean, the special counsel now is appointed. They love Dean because he can focus and you know. So this whole thing was a setup from the real people that withheld the story of Watergate were with the Washington Post. Now, there's no doubt the Oval Office, they slurked around. They didn't know what had happened. They thought maybe somebody else down the hall had done this. They didn't know. A lot of them thought for a long time that Mitchell did. Mitchell ordered this. Now, let me tell you something, Victoria, that will bring this up to give credibility to the story. I've been lecturing for the last 20 years. It's been 20 years now. Last 20 years that John Mitchell, in my view, was innocent, that he'd had nothing to do with this, that he didn't order it, that he knew nothing about this. He was the head of the campaign at the time. Well, there's a young man named Gerard Groff, who's a pretty bright young historian, and he listened to the tapes and came out with something called The New History of Watergate. It's a very good book on many levels.
I've heard different opinions about it, but keep going.
Well, I will also say there's some things that are very bad. I'm trying to be charitable here, but some of it is very good. Let me put it this way. And what he's good at is faithfully recounting some of the tapes, what was on the tapes, that nobody has read before in any of these books. Okay, he got into some tapes. And what he showed was pretty darn good evidence that around March or so of 1973, the inner Oval Office was figuring out that Mitchell was innocent. They all thought that he might have ordered this. It made sense that he would have ordered it. It came from the campaign. Why wouldn't he have ordered it? And so forth. Well, they began figuring out that Mitchell didn't have anything to do with this. And they came to so he came to the conclusion, Groff, that Mitchell was innocent, as I had been for, and I've been that way for 50 years, but I just started talking about it 20 years ago. So so you had that issue. Where am I going here on this? I started thinking of something else. I'm in the
James Rosen wrote a book about
yes
John Mitchell.
Rosen. Okay, there you go.
And
James Rosen,
and he's going, what? You know.
James Rosen hit it right, and James Rosen came out with a book called Strongman and said, in so many words, Mitchell's innocent. Now, later on, Gerard Groff comes along and says, I've listened to the tapes, he's innocent. Now, this is interesting. What he says here is what makes this book bad. He obviously was doing this book in collaboration with our friends at the Washington Post. Now, all along, the Post had contended that this was an Oval Office job because Nixon's best friend, who was with the campaign, was John Mitchell. And John Mitchell ordered this, so obviously the White House knew about it. This was part of their deal. Well, guess what? If Mitchell didn't do it, the whole proof, the whole possibility that the White House ordered this is off the table. Who the heck ordered it? Now James Rosen proved it, but only conservatives believe James Rosen. Everybody else wants to say, oh, no, he's full of it. Now
that book was meticulous.
That book was wonderful. Rosen nailed it on the head, and he's a straight guy. So now we come along, and Groff is a good historian, but he's going to sell this book only if the Post helps him sell it, okay? Now, guess what? He says, and so now what are the consequences? You're a detective. You say, well, wait a second. If Mitchell didn't order it, what does that mean for our hypothesis? Well, guess what? It means somebody else ordered it, and it wasn't Mitchell, and it wasn't the Oval Office. Gosh, who was it? And you start getting to the CIA, and maybe John Dean, who was influenced by the CIA, but mainly it was a CIA deal. Now, what does Groff say now that you've said that Mitchell's innocent? Does he tell us what that means for the investigation? No.
Nope.
You know what he says? What difference does it make? Who did it? Who ordered it? Gosh, all the witnesses are dead. I mean, that's like somebody saying, well, you know something? I want to find out who really caused World War I. Was it Germany or was it Austria-Hungary? Who was it? Well, everybody's dead. We can't tell. What about the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln? Oh, we can't tell. Everybody's dead. No,
Right.
historians deal with stuff with people
History
that are
doesn't
dead.
work that way.
Listen, we're still listening to the life of Christ, and
All right.
guess what? They're all dead. Plato, he's dead. And so these guys say, and then at the same time the book is released, it says this: Len Downey, the chairman emeritus of the Post, not officially a Post employee, so he could claim he's removed, but he's still chairman emeritus. Len Downey, longtime chief editor of the Post, gives a glowing account of this book and says, yeah, what difference does it make now? All these witnesses are dead. We'll just let sleeping dogs lie. We know Nixon's a bad guy. Who cares?
Meanwhile, Bob Woodward's alive. He's the one who's been lying for years. Anyway, keep going.
Among others, yes. And so in the CIA, of course, withheld his stuff. But it means everything. And once you take away that building block to the case, it means something else. It means that the Oval Office wasn't involved. And if the Oval Office wasn't involved, what is this now? Yeah. Now we're talking Nixon is our most reviled ex-president. Oh, he's this terrible guy. You heard him boo Rufo. Oh, we all know. We all know because we watch CNN that this is terrible. CNN wouldn't lie to us, would they? Oh, no, we know about this. So this is the trouble with America. People who are semi-highbrow think they're smart because they listen to CNN, know that Nixon was behind Watergate, and every molecule of CO2 is going to cause hurricanes and so forth and so on, and think they know something. Oh, I know that there's this molecule CO2. Oh, I know a lot about climate change. So it's really basically people that think they're smart and they're not smart. At least I
listened to Morning Edition on NPR, and doggone it, I am fully informed.
I am fully informed. They have told me what to think and all that, and I really think I'm a thinker too, because they characterize the arguments of other people. Well, Joe Blow said that this is false. We know he's a jerk. Ha 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 ha. So this is what we get for wisdom, and this is what we get in our media, and at least in the old days, in the 1800s, when there were plenty of thousands and thousands of newspapers around, many of them just saying anything that comes to their mind, at least they fought each other. At least you're in the middle of all this stuff and nobody really believes what any one newspaper says. Now, in our enlightened days, the New York Times elevates everything to a high standard. Oh, everything that's fit to print, everything is out there. The Washington Post says, oh, now we're just like the New York Times. Now that we've broken up Watergate, we're there with the Times. We're great. CNN's there. They're great. We all know this. CBS, NBC, ABC, oh, they're all wonderful. And the fact is, they're either idiots or they're in on the deal. And or as often the case, you don't want to see something you don't want to see, and I think that's more the question. There's not a probing mind, a curious mind that is supposed to be the lifeblood of our democracy. People with open minds, willing to debate. You don't see that. The minds have been closed by constant hammering.
Yeah.
So when we reach 50 years of Watergate, and they do a special with Bob Woodward on CNN about Watergate. Well, Bob, why do you think this happened? I mean, Nixon was way ahead in the polls, and there really wasn't anything to get in the DNC. And remember this: there was nothing to be had there at all. Why would you do it? And he was ahead in the polls by 20 points. Nothing to be had at the DNC. Maybe there'd be yard signs once the campaign started, but the primary hadn't happened yet. The convention hadn't happened. Why did he do this, Bob? Oh, well, he was a guy that was so worried about getting elected that he went to extreme lengths. He was very paranoid, and he did too much. He did it even though it's irrational. Now, let me tell you this, Victoria. One of the best thing that Nixon ever said is, when this thing happens, this burglary happens, and he says to the people around him, I don't mind it that people think I'm a crook. I just hate it that they think I would be this stupid. It made no sense. Why would you do it?
Let me
Yeah.
Let me interject this. There's a comment here. No one cares about CBS, ABC, or NBC. Duh. Oh, but they do, because the entire Watergate canon relies upon the initial reportorial efforts by all of those entities. And all of those same entities are back doing the same thing to Donald Trump. Without the complicity of the media, without the cooperation of the media, these scandals that weren't scandals, these scandals that were started by either Oppo Research and or the deep state and or the intelligence agencies, as happened against both Nixon and Trump, they would never have gotten off the ground were it not for the CBS, ABC, or NBC. And I know you probably get your, Chad, you probably get your news from an entirely different bunch of sources, all of which were started by people who care about CBS, ABC, or NBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post. You just have to understand there's a bloodstream. It's a news bloodstream. And it starts with the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC, CBS, etc. MS Now. Those are all the same people.
Well, correct, Victoria. And think about it this way. The MS Now used to be just a few months ago MSNBC. It's got an NBC connection. For years, the joint polling has always been ABC-Washington Post.
Yep.
Oh, no. And you're right. All this happened. And back when Watergate happened, the major communication sources were these major channels. And they all sang together, row, row, row your boat. They're all the same. And they bought everything. And I got to say, some of it is, in Watergate, I think they were just gullible and stupid because they all got their stuff from the Post. Now, let me tell you how influential the Post was. When they set up this Watergate committee in the Senate, what did they do? These guys didn't know anything about how to prove this. What they did is they said, oh, I know where we'll get our information. We'll get it from Bob Woodward of the Post because he knows everything. We know he knows everything. And so so think about this. They went out and hired Scott Armstrong, and he became the lead investigator for the Senate. Scott Armstrong was a young guy who became a, whatever you want to say, an apparatchik for Woodward, was kind of trailing. He was his buddy, his mentee, and they said, oh, we've got Scott Armstrong, so that's our way of getting everything that Woodward knows. I said, Woodward is the king. Well, tell me how much they're infected by this. And so, and then the whole idea, and then, of course, the prosecutors were all selected by Democrats, and they were so anti-Nixon, it was ridiculous. Let me just go to the 50-year show on CNN about Watergate. When they showed a picture of Nixon, and they're just lambasting Nixon because of all this stuff he supposedly did, which he didn't do, they then switched the screen, and they show Donald Trump. What? Oh, gosh, I'm a smart guy. I guess Donald Trump's just like Nixon. And then they go along about 5 minutes, and you see a picture of Nixon, and then there's Trump. Wait a second. It's these people that think they're smart. Basically, this is just a television show in which there's a villain. And luckily, Nixon kind of looks like a villain. And if you don't like Trump's haircut, you think he's a villain. And basically, that's the whole idea. Trump bad. When we get this, Nixon bad. So now, if somebody wants to have a discussion and really get into something, as Rufo wanted to do about this, what happens? Do people say, what do you have to say, Rufo? I'm interested in your argument. I'm an intellectual guy. I believe in curiosity and argument like John Stuart Mill says I should do. Oh, no, what happens? He says something, they go, boo, boo, we're not going to listen to you. And the whole notion that we are told what to believe. So if you go to UC Berkeley and you're a conservative, you don't make it on stage. I mean, you're just not going to, nobody's going to debate you. And that's what we have with Watergate. It becomes a solidified deal.
Received wisdom. It's canon.
That's right. And in my book, I have some wonderful vignettes about how I got conned into using a particular publisher, not knowing that the chairman of the board was Ben Bradley.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I had to fight.
That was a catch and kill. That was a catch and kill situation.
That was catch and kill. That was back in 2005. Neither of these two books are catch and kill.
No, yours aren't. But
the one I did back in 2006 with Mark Felt is a catch and kill. I've got stuff in there that slyly adds things in that got by my censors, but you have to be real astute to read it and know what I'm saying. But I didn't want to be accused later on of not trying to write this stuff. But at the time, I wasn't as confident that during the reporting that they had deliberately missed all this stuff that I wanted to talk about. I just knew there was stuff that hadn't been told. And only later did I say, you know something? They were so adamant about me not publishing this stuff. Maybe they knew about it at the time, because it's not clear just because something comes up 5 years later that the Post knew about it. It's unfair to say just because something happened afterwards that they knew it before. So I started researching, and I talk about it in the book. I researched Postgate for over 9 years.
I bet.
Oh yeah, and the hardest thing to do is not only to find everything, but to make it compact so the reader can get through everything pretty quickly. So I try to be as concise as I can, but include everything. But basically, they knew the thing that they knew darn good and well, and that's why they went to the ends of the earth to try to suppress me earlier. And it made me so mad. That's why I did 9 years of research, because I've got other things to do. I'm practicing law. You know, if you want to make a small fortune in writing books, you start out with a large fortune. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have a comment from somebody. I know that there's an element of truth, but tell me about this. There is a recording of Nixon trying to use the CIA to cover up the FBI investigation. That alone is a crime. Ha ha. Well, yeah, I know there's.
Ha ha, Mr. Ha ha. You may want to look for other facts. Look at the Washington Examiner. I have a 900-word article today about that very subject. You are astute in that was the one act caught on tape that they thought at the time doomed Nixon. And it did, in fact, doom him based upon what was known in the public, because most of the public didn't think the CIA was involved. And I go through the deal. My client, Mark Felt, thought the CIA was might be involved from the very beginning, told that to John Dean, told it to his boss, who told it to John Dean. And John Dean, meanwhile, Nixon wanted the FBI not to investigate the Mexican money trail, but not because it had any evidential value as to guilt or innocence. And Nixon knew that he wasn't guilty of anything. He did that because his friend Dwayne Andreas, the head of Archer Midland Daniels, the big Midwest food processor, he had given Nixon a big check. But Andreas was a Democrat, and he was deathly afraid that people would find out he gave money to a Republican. So Nixon didn't want this money trail investigation, wasn't going to do anything other than find out who it was that was behind the checks. You know, it wasn't going to tell them anything. People knew about the checks, knew that Liddy had gotten White House money. The thing was financed with White House money. All they didn't know was who had written the donations. Well, that has nothing to do with criminal innocence or guilt. And that's all that stopping the money trail would have done. Now, in answer to this very good question, by the way, by the viewer, in answer to that question, what would have happened had the Post been honest and had this thing come about and the Post been honest and everybody said, oh, this was a CIA job. Now it comes out later that Nixon says, oh, by the way, tell the FBI that this might expose a CIA operation. And there was some basis for it because Dean had told this based on Patrick Gray, based on Felt. And those people weren't available as witnesses. But the point is, it would have looked like, sure, Nixon figured out that it might be the CIA, and so he did this. And it really would have uncovered a CIA operation. Mm-hmm. In fact, the guy that was washing money for him in Mexico, an entirely unnecessary thing, by the way, it was just people trying to act like CIA agents. But he had been washing money for the CIA for years and had actually done it for the Eisenhower administration when they planned some stuff on Cuba and laundered money through Mexico City through the same guy. But my point is that comment by the viewer is exactly, that's an astute person who gets that part of the evidence but doesn't understand the background. And I think that's an astute person. And that was the basis for Nixon resigning. But read my article, and once you read the article, you'll say, "Aha! I didn't know anything else to put that as a frame of reference." So I do not make fun of that. In fact, it's a very astute question.
Yeah, and not everybody knows that. So that's it's important. It's important.
Yeah, that's why I wrote the article. I wrote the article especially for people who knew that.
So you talk about financing all of the CIA stuff, and we've heard about BCCIs in subsequent years, and that bank blew up, and we hear about. I mean, I'm gonna just throw this at you as a just crazy thing. We hear about the likes of Jeffrey Epstein and how he's willing and does finance for what appears to be the intelligence community. Would that surprise you if that were out there and as a possibility, and why he had so much dirt on people, apparently?
Well, no, not at all. And as a matter of fact, the CIA and Jeffrey Epstein were in the same game. Remember what the CIA does here. The CIA is mainly an extortion outfit. I think that's a good idea, actually, if they do it the right way, because you want to get somebody that's a Russian guy, you want him to talk. And unfortunately, you've got to do that in spycraft, and that's why we give these people immunity. So I don't downplay that at all. Mm-hmm. But remember, Epstein was in the extortion business. I mean, he had all kinds of dirt on people and used it to get things from them. So now, was Epstein financing the CIA? Maybe he might have been, but mainly probably as a vehicle to use the CIA to get, because he's going to get something back from the CIA, isn't he? He's going to get, just don't give. Jeffrey Epstein is not the kind of guy that is a charitable guy. I'm going to give you some money to the CIA because I'm just a patriotic guy. No, he's in the same game. And remember, he can get information from these people because they're all about exchanging information. Remember what James Comey did in your wonderful Russiagate. There was a Russian spy that was clearly involved as Christopher Steele's, who I think was a dirty bird when he was a MI6 agent. Mm-hmm. But Christopher Steele's main subsource for the Steele dossier was a guy named Igor Danchenko, who
worked for the Brookings Institution.
Right, and they had caught him offering money for people that were going to go to the State Department if, when they got to the State Department, they would give him some information. Yep. So it looked like it was a spy thing. They couldn't convict him and so forth. But he's a Russian spy. I mean, let's face it, he's a Russian spy, everything, But meanwhile, what does the FBI do when they want to get Donald Trump? They start paying Igor Danchenko to help him out. And they also bring in Igor Danchenko into all their pending operations against the Russians. They had something like 13 separate investigations, counterintelligence, and they bring Igor Danchenko in to help him out, all so that they can use Igor to get Trump. Well, wait a second. They just spilled our family jewels. It's right there in the Horowitz report, and that they did this. And if you look at it with a critical eye and know,
I'm going back to read that. I'm going to go back and read that completely.
Oh yeah, and some of this you might want to look on my. I tell your viewers, look on my website, Postgate. All the articles I've published, I have up there. There may be 140 of them, But in some cases, I synthesize this stuff on the Russiagate thing, and I have some really good articles that will save people a lot of time if they read the Russiagate stuff. Once again, start with this large fortune, maybe get a small fortune. I do this just for the love of it. But it's all there. But here we are. We are, in order to get Donald Trump for a trumped up charge,
right,
we give away our family jewels to Russia. This stuff went to Russia. And when they're trying gin up this peeing prostitute thing, Igor Danchenko says, well, I've got a person that can help us. I'm going to bring in Olga Galkina. And if you look up her, she's a Russian spy. She comes over from some foreign posting to America with the promise that she will get into Hillary Clinton's State Department once Hillary, of course, gets elected in 2016. And Galkina writes emails to people saying, ha, 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 I'm getting into Hillary's State Department. Well, basically, how bad are we that we're allowing Russians, in order to get Donald Trump, we'd have 2 Russian spies, Danchenko and Galkina. And Galkina's going to get everything that is known in the State Department because she's the Russian speaker. They will have the whole Russian thing wired. I'm not going to say here that Fiona Hill was a spy, but if you looked at her friendship with Galkina and
Danchenko,
with Danchenko and Steele, who she supposedly was a girlhood friend of, I don't know. That's just
no. Your instincts are right.
I don't know about this, but I don't want to call her that. What I'm thinking she is, but the evidence, and so in order to do this, to play these politics, here's my point. You play these politics and you're willing to give up. You're willing to give up America's secrets. Hillary Clinton, in order to get money for her campaign for this Uranium One sale, also, among other things, also started giving dual-use technology to the Russian Silicon Valley Skolkovo, which again, in the Defense Department said, wait a second. As part of this Russian reset, where incidentally the Clinton Foundation was getting hundreds of millions of dollars from these people, in order to do this, you're giving dual-use technology to the Russians. This is some of our state secrets, and you're giving it away to them. Well, you know, Hillary's in the State Department; she can do what she wants on that. So, the law, and of course, what was Biden doing when you allow the Chinese blimp there, and Hunter Biden happens to have all these Chinese connections and is getting all kinds of money. I mean, it's right in front of our nose, and nobody does anything about that.
Well, we howled about it, but I mean, the uranium. Rush Limbaugh used to talk about the Uranium One deal. I mean, people were howling about it, but nothing was done.
But Victoria, you and I and Rush Limbaugh and people like that were doing it, but that doesn't mean that the people who really know were going along with it. If they were legitimate journalists, they would say, yeah, there's something to this howling. Let's investigate it.
Right.
But that's the problem, is they all joined together to say this is nonsense. So I'm a jury trial lawyer, and I know if the other side, I can have the best case in the world, but if the other side gets 6 people on the jury to just fold their arms and say, I don't care, you're not going to win the case, are you? And unfortunately, the people that have their arms folded control a lot of the media. And, so you and I and people like that know what's going on. We howl about it. We're watching things closely. We look at evidence. Our minds are open. I'm not going to howl unless I really think I've got something. Same with you. I'm a big fan of yours. But so there are a lot of people who understand what's going on, and it's very frustrating. And people don't understand how Trump tapped into the frustration of people that are tired of this. They want somebody who just comes out and says, I don't care what the regular conventional wisdom is. I'm saying what common sense says is true. And that resonates with people. People don't care if Trump has a few bucks or, is narcissistic. Will he tell the truth, and does he have the guts to go through this stuff? I mean, there's a lot of things Trump does that I wouldn't do if I were president, and I can't justify everything he does. But by God, you know, you need somebody that's got the guts to fight this. It's a big fight we're in, Victoria, and people are not doing what all the students of democracy talk about. Tocqueville, John Stuart Mill. You have to discuss and debate and keep open minds and come to reasoned conclusions and compromise, which is the strength of our democracy. And yet now we have ideological thinking. Oh, if you say something against, you know, the received wisdom, sorry, you're like a person in Russia that got sent to Siberia. We get sent to Siberia. It's just a Siberia of, you know, people not believing us. Are not investigating what they should investigate. So this is, to me, and this is why I like your show so much, because you're not afraid to talk. You're not afraid to say things that are obvious common sense conclusions of someone who actually thinks sequentially for more than one or two steps. So that's the world we have. And I think that's why Watergate to me is important. And it's not because what happened 54 years ago is that important if it didn't have anything to do with today. But it's what set the template. And every time we have a scandal, it's got a gate suffixed to it, the word gate. Why?
Right.
Because this was the mother of all scandals, and it incentivized the media to be king makers and king breakers. Oh, we'll all get together, the New York Times, and we'll decide what we're going to do. Oh, yeah, we're all going to go after Trump this year. That's what we're going to do this year. We're a king maker or a king breaker. In this case, we're going to break Trump. Oh, and we'll make Biden. Let's everybody ignore Biden's obvious deformities and
his problems
and other corruption problems. Let's just go with that. So that's what we've got. We've got very ideological thinking on one side of the fence here, and unfortunately, a lot of those people are controlling the media.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, John O'Connor. Thank you. The books are.
This has been fun for me. It's been fun for me, Victoria. I hope it's been fun for your audience.
Completely on fire today. The mysteries of Watergate and Postgate. And John Dean turned state's evidence. He was the promulgator of all of it. And then he poisoned the well by telling Nixon in a meeting that he'd never met with the president before, gets a meeting with the president, which was a mistake, need a better gatekeeper there. Yeah. And then he begins to tell the story about, we've got a problem here, and we need to help this guy out because he's in legal trouble now. And then he gets Nixon to say, well, yeah, that's a terrible thing. And then all of a sudden he turns state's evidence and says he told the president that there was a cancer on the presidency.
Yes, but the cancer, let me jump in. The cancer was the little guy talking to the president. The cancer was a walking, talking guy named John Dean, is what it is.
Scoundrel.
And before I get off, what John Dean was a lawyer, but he never figured out that under the laws of every state in the Union, including the D.C., when someone under your employment is in legal trouble, you can and you must indemnify them by paying their legal expenses. John Dean acted like that was a criminal enterprise who would have people paying legal expenses by going to lockers, and people would pick up the. It's what you're supposed to do. If I had the most fraudulent employee in the world got charged, I would have to pay his legal expenses until it was clear he was criminal. And yet, Dean never figured that out. I mean, you can't. And meanwhile, he, of course, was the guy advising these people when he actually had the liability. He was the only one who knew how this thing had come about. You can't make this up.
He'll never admit it. He always comes back. He and Carl Bernstein, probably what Bob Woodward let to a lesser extent, but they always get trotted out when there's a new scandal, and they're always required to say, yes, this is worse than Watergate.
Yes, and of course everything is worse than Watergate. If I jaywalk, it's worse than Watergate, at least in terms of Nixon's comparison. But my comparison of worse than Watergate means, is the media worse today than they were in Watergate? And I'm not sure. They're awful bad in Russian collusion. So,
That's true.
Worse than Watergate? Maybe not, but it's all media. It's media sins that is the real root of our democratic problem. And democracy does die in darkness. And if you have a paper that does the darkness, then that's not good for democracy.
That is correct. It's not good for a representative republic. It's not good for informing Americans. And some people say, well, I don't, I would never watch this show again, or I'd never look at this newspaper or this show again. You don't do that in a vacuum. You look at everything. You get a breadth of information so that you can come to a decision. You can come to a conclusion. Thank you, John O'Connor. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'm going to read your piece because I didn't, I found out about it too late to be able to just read it. And
it just got up, just was put up. So anyway, thanks for your indulging me. I sometimes feel like I'm talking a mile a minute, but it's important to get this story out.
Yeah, you were on fire today. Appreciate it. Go get them.
Take care. Victoria. See you now.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it very much. Okay, well, one of the things I wanted to bring up before we say goodbye is that you really are naysayers out there, people who don't believe, like they say, oh, this is ridiculous. I can't believe you believe this. This is insane. Okay, you can have it your way, or my question to you is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about books that have been written on this? I'm not saying the evidence. John O'Connor is a federal prosecutor turned private litigator. He writes this book like it's a legal brief. What are you going to do with his information? You're going to continue to just ignore it? You're just going to pretend it doesn't exist? You're going to pretend that, all of the people who have come after Trump have been lying to you? Well, get ready. When you find out, your mind blown. I'd like to leave you with this discussion. I hope it comes up properly. And it is a woman who found out that liking Donald Trump was going to mean that she'd lose her job. And so I want you to see her. What do you do with her when all is said and done?
Hi, friends. I'm Delicia Ballinger, and I am an independent journalist and mother from Memphis, Tennessee. I walked away from the Democratic Party after I realized our values no longer aligned. Once I was fired from an all-black news publication here that I worked for almost 2 years. President Trump announced that he was bringing the National Guard to Memphis. It was my job and duty to cover those stories. And of course, as always, by journalistic standards, to always tell the truth, no matter from what side. If you didn't like it, if you liked it, it was my job to be able to cover that, and that's what I did. But it wasn't until I made a video, and this video was made on my own time, and it was from a mother experience, because I live in these communities where it was going to be affected and be impacted. I mean, I realized this one particular day when I'm actually walking out to my mailbox, and it was extremely quiet, which was a normal thing in my neighborhood, because I was used to gunshots and other things happening around the neighborhood. For once, it was actually quiet and I could hear the birds sing. So I just made a video about that, just sharing my experience and thanking Trump. The video literally... That
was her problem. She thanked Trump.
I wasn't prepared for it, but it did. And a lot of people had a lot of things to say about it. It was like instantly the black community turned on me because I thanked Trump for it. Not only that, the publication that I worked for was totally against what I said, all because I thanked Trump in the video. From that point going forward, they wanted me to take the videos down. They gave me an ultimatum, but ultimately I wasn't given that chance, because by the following day, everything that I was assigned with was taken away, and I was told pretty much bye. But from that point going forward, it was my job and duty to just make people aware that the media lies, because they do. Why should I be fired for actually telling the truth and showing that the president actually did make a difference in my neighborhood? I then started to do my research and look further and further into the truth when you're talking about President Trump and wanting to know more about the things that he's done. And I realized from there that he's actually done some great actionable things for America. And I never really understood the hate. The more I read, the more I actually started to like him. Crazy thing about it all was that I actually did want to meet the president, but never in my wildest dreams did I think that something like that would happen. Just last month on March 23rd, President Trump came to Memphis to basically show his accomplishments for the Memphis 8 Task Force. And I wanted to be there, and I got that opportunity. I had a chance to meet the 45th and 47th President of the United States.
Oh, that racist. I can't believe it. He's a terrible person, right? What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? I don't do this every time we're on, but I do wonder, you're met with evidence. You're met with story. What are you going to do with it? So here we go. Chamath Palihapitiya. He's one of the guys on the podcast All In, which is an excellent podcast. I commend it to your viewing. And he's talking about Donald Trump. Here he is talking about his experience with Trump before and after.
The reality is that most of us were lied to by the media about President Trump. And if you just go back to the source material, you should take away two things. One, he didn't say half the things he said. And two, why did these other people just fabricate what they wanted to say so that they could essentially assassinate his character? I think that second thing is completely unacceptable in America. And there's still been no repercussions, really. I took the time to learn about it. I admitted where, the way that I met him was I admitted on the pod, which, has millions of viewers. And I said, I got it totally wrong. Because I went and I watched Charlottesville. And the first person to call me?
Charlottesville.
Who was it?
President Trump. And I got to know him. And I put the phone down. I called my wife and I said, we got it totally, totally wrong. We were lied to. And then I got to know him, and he is fantastic. The reality is that most
so that's
of us were lied
Chamath, but what is he? What are you going to do with it, though? You're required to respond. I've told you what happened in the past today, told you what happened in the recent past, told you what's happening now. I've told you people from that reporter to Chamath Palihapitiya, a billionaire to a thousandaire. I don't know how much money she has, but okay, let's just assume she's like in my league. And I'm telling you, you can ignore it, or you can read, or you can listen to people you trust. Instead of trying to besmirch my character here in the chat, why don't you take a look at the facts yourself? I've been in this business of reporting and talk and all kinds of things, writing, for 40 years. And I've learned the hard way. You don't have to learn the hard way. You can learn the easy way. You can take my word for it, but you don't have to. If you're smart, you won't. You'll just look at it for yourself. Don't be fooled, though. Don't be fooled. I'll see you on Thursday. And on Thursday, Jeff Shepard, we're going to do a second part of the deep dive into Watergate. Jeff Shepard is a guy who's listened to all of the Nixon tapes. He's the guy who initially said, oh my God, he's guilty of something. And then went back over time and went, oh my, I was wrong. And then, as an attorney, looks at what happened in court, in the House, in the Senate, before Judge Sirica, and finds out the truth. That he was a president who was deposed, not found guilty, but he left because he knew he had lost support. A guy who won 49 out of 50 states had lost support because of the media lying to you and people whispering in their ear. So I'll see you on Thursday. It's going to be a good one. I've got other stuff. Next week, it's going to be Hot Book Summer. It's going to be so great. Alex, hold on just a second. I want to make sure I say, is it Alex Decker? I think it's Alex Decker. Yeah. This guy, new author. Holy crap. I'm going to tell you all about his book. We're going to talk to him. That's going to be next Thursday. All right. Donald Trump didn't make her lose her job. Yeah, no, those ignorant people at the newspaper made her lose her job. That's what happened. It's always the people. It's always the people. People. See you on Thursday. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. We do not take you for granted. We appreciate every single person who tunes in every week to listen and watch this program. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, live streaming on Rumble, and then on every other podcast platform shortly thereafter when we can port it over and get it over there as soon as we can. All the shows can be found at victoriataft.com, where the censorship regime has been banned by me. Follow me on social media at these names: Victoria Taft, the Adult in the Room podcast, and the Victoria Taft Show. Send media inquiries, or any others for that matter, to victoria@victoriataft.com. And here's a big ask. Would you please subscribe, share, like, comment, recommend, and give this program a 5-star rating where you can? We really appreciate it. We do not take that for granted either. Follow my work at, you guessed it, victoriataft.com. PJ Media, I write tons over there. Flamingo Audiobooks, and of course the radio. I don't do this alone. This show is produced and engineered by Overall Media. 1A Cast is responsible for some of the Adult in the Room podcast's imaging. Logo design by Hageman Creative. The Adult in the Room podcast is produced at Flamingo Road Studios. All rights reserved.